Okay, welcome to the webinar Google Consent Mode V2. We will start with the legal background or the general background on the Google Consent Mode. First step, the legal background. So you all know about GDPR and e-privacy. You heard it a million times. GDPR and e-privacy, that's where we talk about data protection and regulation for cookies and data processing and these kind of things. That's quite old, I would say. The new thing now is the DMA and the DSA. That's two legal frameworks in the EU that are targeting specifically big customers or big companies. The DMA is the Digital Markets Act. The DSA is the Digital Services Act. Both are kind of influencing why we have the the Google Consent Mode, but the main thing is the DMA. Digital Markets Act is basically a regulation that should help getting rid of monopolies, or trying to put things into motion or pieces into motion so that monopolies are not being created, and so that smaller companies have it easier to access the markets. There are things like transparency, higher transparency for bigger companies, higher transparency towards the competition, a better way to work with the competition, things like opening your APIs, opening your internal logic a bit, unbundling of services, so not connecting tool A with tool B. If you think about Google, for example, Google has a lot of services like search or ads or Google Maps or something. That's something that a smaller company doesn't have, and therefore they have a disadvantage. And that's why the DMA is, for example, targeting this unbundling things. And what the DMA is doing is, or what actually the DMA includes, is that the EU is designating gatekeepers, so companies or services that are basically too big. And Google has several of these services. You see them on the right. Google Search, YouTube, the Android operating system, the Chrome browser, Google Ads, so that was formerly Google AdWords, the Google Shopping part, Google Play Store, and Google Maps. There's more gatekeepers like Facebook, for example, or TikTok. But yeah, Google has a lot of services that fall under the gatekeeper rule. There's also fines to it. In this case, it's 10% of the annual revenue. So let's say it's important for Google to follow these rules, because 10% of the annual revenue is can be significant. Let's say it this way. And since Google has so many services that are affected, they needed to come up with a way to provide this transparency and to provide these competition things, etc. And one of these ways is the consent mode that we're talking today. Why is this important to Google? You see here in this chart, that's the Google earnings of 2023, I think, or 22. So they made $282 billion in revenues. That's a huge number. And you see where it's coming from. So a big chunk is coming from the Google search. So basically the advertising on the Google search results. Then there's AdSense and AdMob. So that's the advertising on third-party websites. You have the ads in Google, in YouTube, sorry. And then you have other services in Google Cloud, where they also have significant revenues. But what you see is that a big part, so let's say 2/3 or more than 3/4 actually, of the revenues are coming from something that is related to ads, right? So the Google search is related to ads, AdSense and AdMob is related to ads, and YouTube ads is also ads. So everything is advertising basically. So it is vital for Google to protect the advertising and to keep it running, to keep this advertising machinery running. But what now happens with the DMA is that some things are limited. Advertising needs tracking, for example. Otherwise, the advertisers don't know what, how many conversions they have and how successful their campaigns are, and maybe they lose interest in advertising. And also, advertising needs profiling, because without profiling, the results are not so good, right? So if you know the person that towards you which you are advertising, you can direct the message much better. You can use the money much better. The advertising spend is much better, and the conversion rate is better. So you want tracking, you want personalization, but the DMA is now specifically saying, "Hey Google, tracking and personalization, don't do it like in the same way that you did it before. You need to unbundle your services, and a big part of this bundling that Google was doing is, for example, that you have data that is gathered via, let's say, Google Analytics or in Google Maps or in the Google search, that this data is then later also used to create your profile, to the profile of the user. So Google is combining basically all your activity and puts it in a profile. If they can't bundle this information anymore, the profile is less accurate. The other thing is, part of the DMA is also that the DMA specifically tells the gatekeepers to collect consent for advertising. So you don't have anything like legitimate interest and these kind of things anymore. They need to have consent, and they specifically need to have consent if they collect the data on third-party websites. So that's when we're talking about Google AdSense, for example. And that's usually used on a third-party website, right? So your website is the third party, Google is the first party. Google is no longer allowed to use this data and to combine this data. So there's a problem, right? No tracking, no personalization. What can Google do? So the answer, as said, is the Google consent mode. The first step there is a policy that Google created, or that actually existed, but now is even more relevant. It's called EU UCP, or EU User Consent Policy from Google. It's a policy that basically tells all the website owners what they can do with Google services. So if you have analytics on your website or in your app, or if you have AdSense, YouTube videos, or Google Maps or Recapture, all these Google services, if you put them in your website or in your app, you must follow this EU user consent policy. And the policy basically says, you need to have a cookie banner that's compliant, right? So you need to have a certain wording in there. You need to have you need to mention the Google services. You need to ask for consent, basically. You need to do this for all of your visitors that are in the EEA and in the UK. So it's basically mainland Europe plus UK, so to say. It doesn't include Switzerland, but it includes the rest of Europe, basically. And it is independent on where your company is sitting. So even if your website is, I don't know, if your company is in let's say China or in America, if you have users from the EU or from the EEA or UK on your website, you need to ask these users for consent. So that's the policy side, basically. The policy side basically tells you, hey, it would be nice if you would use the consent mode, because Google has this requirement to higher transparency. And one piece of this is also that Google can ensure that they know that you actually asked for consent. So that your website or that your app actually has a consent banner. And the problem is, there's like, let's say, hundreds of different cookie banner tools out there. And it's not really feasible for Google to try to understand them all. So that's why Google comes up with this new standard, with this consent mode standard, where basically the cookie banner will align them to Google, right? So that the cookie banner will tell Google what happens. There was consent mode before, so consent mode is not really a new thing. There was consent mode V1, basically, the old version or the first version, that had these two signals, one for the cookies for advertising and the other one for cookies for analytics. And the DMA now, or with the new DMA regulation, basically the consent mode is extended. You have two more signals. That's the signal for data transfers. So the inner Google exchanges basically for advertising, and you have the second or the fourth signal, the second new signal for personalized advertising. So that's the new, basically the new consent mode v2. Why does it, or what does Google exactly do with this? Or what does the consent mode do with Google? Maybe let's say it this way. So the essential is that the cookie banner would talk to Google. The cookie banner would use this technical signal to send it to Google and say, hey, this user just granted consent, or this user just rejected consent. They don't give, whatever happened on the website, I tell you now. The cookie banner can do this automatically. Google will take it and will then, do something with it. Google is going to require this. We'll come to this later a bit, what requires actually means. But basically it will go towards the direction that if you don't have it, you will not have tracking, you will not have personalization. So Google will stop using the data and don't do stuff with the data, even if they have the data, if they don't get these consent mode signals. And that includes getting the negative consent mode signals. So if you don't have any consent mode at all, Google will also not do anything with your data in the future. Google recommends that you use a certified CMP. So that's why consent manager is. So that's why we have this discussion here. And Google recommends that advertisers shall implement this before March 2024. That's the deadline for the DMA, basically when DMA comes into force for this requirements for Google there. That's the 6th of March or 7th of March. So Google recommends that you do this, that you implement this before, so that you don't lose audience features. Basically, it's about not losing the history of your website. Consent mode is not part of everything that is displaying advertising on your app. So if you're using Google AdSense or AdMob, that is not where Google consent mode is important. And that's where the policy is important here. This EU UCP policy is important. This applies for all these tools, but consent mode mainly applies for analytics and Google Ads. So the AdWords and remarketing tool. And Firebase analytics, basically. So AdSense, AdMob, all cases where you have advertising on your page, they are not covered by consent mode. That's where you take the IAB TCF standard. That's already relevant since 16th of January. But you don't need the consent mode, basically. Yeah, what does the consent mode do? So these two cases, the one case is you have the consent mode, or you have a conversion tag, for example, on the website, and you have consent mode activated. What will happen is Google listens to whatever the consent mode is sending, so accept or reject. If the user accepted, Google will do the full tracking in analytics, inclusive all of your e-commerce stuff, profiling, etc. It will do a full conversion tracking also across sessions. So if I click today and then I order something tomorrow, it will connect these two sessions together and will know, aha, I clicked on this ad today and this conversion tomorrow belongs to this ad, etc. It will do the remarketing, and it will do the personalization. Basically everything as you know it, right? If you give consent and you have the consent mode, everything will remain the same. If the user reject, what will happen in the future is Google will send cookieless pings. That's basically just a fancy word for sending data to Google. But in this case, basically sending data without setting cookies, so to say. That's the difference. Google will track the conversion itself, but without details. So you will see there is one conversion, but you will not see all the details of the conversion. For example, you will not see cross session conversions. You will not see that there was a conversion belonging to a certain campaign, for example. So a lot of details will be missing. And in analytics, for example, you will see the page views, but again, you will lose details. You will maybe, again, not see the sources or the campaigns, etc. What Google will do there in this case is they will enable conversion modeling and behavior modeling. That's something that we will look into in a minute. So basically, if rejection is there, consent mode is on, Google will know, aha, now I need to do something. I need to do the modeling. On the other hand, the other scenario, if you don't enable the consent mode and you have the conversion tag on your website, Google will treat it as rejection. There will not be any tracking or any fancy tracking, let's say it this way, no details. There will be the normal tracking of the conversion, meaning there was one conversion, but again, without details. There will be analytics. Again, you will count the page views, but no details to the page views. There will not be remarketing, no personalization, no user-specific data, no data transfers between analytics and Google Ads. So nothing, no exchange between the two, and you will not have the modeling. And the modeling is something that is that makes the consent mode a bit more interesting, let's say it this way. So without consent mode, it's very, very limited. With consent mode, at least you get the modeling in case of a rejection. How does Consent Manager help you there? Yeah, basically, we are one of the certified CMPs. There's not so many for consent mode. We are certified for web, app, and CTV, so for TV apps. The texts and the designs are already aligned to the requirements that Google has, so you don't need to do something specifically to basically to accompany this EU UCP policy, this thing. So there's nothing specific that you need to change, etc. You can just use our default designs. When possible, our system will automatically set default values, send the defaults to Google. Basically, when the user comes on the website, we will tell Google, wait a second, please use this as rejected and wait on consent. And once the user accepted or rejected, we will send an update to Google and tell them basically, yeah, now the user accepted, you can do something, track a bit more. In our system, there is 2 or 3 vendors that are important for you. The one vendor is Google Analytics, S26, that's the ID of this vendor. So in your vendor list, if you want to have Google tracking, Google Analytics tracking, you should ensure that you have Google Analytics in your vendor list. This will enable this analytics storage signal that we send to consent mode. And the other part is for the Google Ads part, so the AdWords. You can enable Google Ads as one or Google advertising products. So we have 2 vendors in our system. They are synonymous. So you can use the one or the other. It doesn't matter. You can also use both. Doesn't matter. As soon as one of these vendors has consent, we will send these signals to Google. So storage, so that they can set cookies, they can use the user data, exchange the user data, and do the personalization. So basically, you just add them to your vendor list. The only thing is, if you created let's say a custom Google, this will not work, right? You cannot just create a vendor in our system, call it Google. The system will not know what you need to do with this. So if you want to use the consent mode, you need to use these 3 vendors. Yeah. Then what happens after March 24? So as said, the DMA comes into force on the 6th or 7th of March. It is not yet clear what exactly will happen. Google highlights that you should enable the consent mode already now before March, so that you don't lose any historic data. It is not 100% clear what on the 7th or 8th of March then will happen. Maybe everything stays the same for a while. Maybe Google will downgrade the tracking, like step by step. Like some accounts will not have tracking today, some more accounts will not have tracking tomorrow, or certain features will not happen tomorrow, or maybe something like this. Maybe there's really a hard cut that from the 8th of March you will need consent mode, otherwise you don't have any tracking. It's not 100% clear now. There is rumors that the personalization will be stopped on the 8th of March. There's rumors that basically everything stopped on the 8th of March. Just given the history, how Google treated, for example, the TCF change, or the third-party cookies, the deprecation of third-party cookies, it is likely that it's not a hard cut, but more a phase out. So that basically from March on, some features will not work, and then a bit more features maybe in April, and some more features in May, and at one point everything will be disabled if you don't use the consent mode, right? So that's a big question at the moment. As soon as we sent a question to Google this morning just to clarify. As soon as we have more info, we will also post this in our newsletter and on our website once there's a clear timeline. But as said, Google recommends that you do this now. Okay. Yeah, the modeling, as said, when you have the consent mode on, there is an important thing that is really interesting for advertisers. That's the modeling. There's two modelings. This, as said, the one is this behavioral modeling, then we have this conversion modeling. What the behavior modeling is doing is basically it's helping your Google Analytics. So the problem, you have users that click on reject. Definitely, if you have a reject button, users will click on reject. Or if you have just settings buttons, users will find a way not to click on accept. And the solution to this problem is, if users click on reject, you will have less data. And the solution there is basically the Google AI will use the historic data to forecast the missing parts. So for the users that have rejected, we don't see them in analytics, but the clever Google AI will find a way to show us data anyway. And this can answer questions like, how many daily active users do I have? How many users came from a specific advertising campaign? What's the typical user journey across my website, and from which country are the visitors coming? So quite interesting questions, let's say it this way. There's a requirement, or there's several requirements actually for behavioral modeling. So if you want to use behavioral modeling, you need to have the consent mode installed on all of your websites. So not only on the start page, but also the product pages and all the sub pages, or everything all across your website. You cannot use hard blocking. We will also come to this soon. There's two ways, soft blocking and hard blocking. You cannot use the hard blocking, meaning the Google codes need to be active on the page. And we will just, so the consent manager will just tell Google that there is consent or no consent, and Google will then automatically do less or more tracking. So no hard blocking in this case. And you have two requirements on the events. You need to have a minimum of 1,000 events per day with rejection in the last 7 days. So you need to have enough activity on your page. An event can be a page view. An event can also be a add to cart, or everything that's happening on your website that you're tracking. You need to have at least 1,000 per day in the last 7 days, so 7,000 in total. And you need to have 1,000 users per day on at least 7 days of the last 28 days. So basically, again, you need to have 1,000 users, and at least on 7 days, you need to have these 1,000 users. Only if all these criteria is met, only then behavioral modeling will happen. The background, or the reason why this is quite a high requirement is behavioral analysis is, you need more data in order to get a better profiling. Hence, it's nothing for small websites. If you want to have behavioral modeling, then you need to have a bigger website, let's say it this way. The other part is the conversion modeling. That's the even more interesting part, especially for advertisers. So again, kind of same problem. User comes on the website, clicks on reject, and we don't, the conversions just disappear from the tracking. What will happen is the Google AI again does their clever magic and forecast the missing conversions. So Google will use the historic data of your website and other websites, we will come to this in a minute, to basically analyze what's happening, what are these rejection users doing. Google claims that they, in average, can recover 65% of the missing conversions. So the conversions that you don't see in analytics, Google will forecast 65% of them by using aggregated and non-identifying signals. So that's things like the browser information, but not a cookie, for example. We'll also look at this in a minute. The requirement for this is you need to have a Google AdWords account or Google Ads, and you need to have 700 clicks per week. So if you have 700 clicks per week, this modeling will happen. Alternative is you need to use soft blocking, so not hard blocking, or you need to have the behavioral modeling. One of these three things, and you get the conversion modeling. So for most advertisers, 700 clicks a week, so that's 100 clicks per day. That's, I would say, is a normal advertising account, so it should be fairly possible to reach this amount. How does the conversion modeling work? As an example calculation, let's assume you have 1,000 visits that are coming from your Google AdWords campaign. Half are rejecting, the other half is accepting. So this rejection half Google will not see. Let's assume we do hard blocking, right? So we really exclude the Google tags, or we block the Google tags if the user rejects. So Google will not see this right side here, this red side. Google will see the 500 accepted. This 500 accepted will do 50 conversions, and Google will track these 50 conversions. Google knows that they sent us 1,000 visits because they're coming from Google Ads, and they know that 500 accepted because that's the 500 they see. So they can calculate, wait a second, 500 rejected. So 500 users are missing in the calculation. So Google already knows, there's 500 users that we don't see. And what also Google knows from their modeling and from other websites is that also these 500 users that rejected, I mean, they will also do conversions, right? It's just they don't accept. It's not that they leave the shop or something. They just don't want to accept. They're doing conversions. Maybe they're not doing so many conversions. That's also a learning that Google has. But Google knows, from these 500 rejected users, 15 will do a conversion. Don't get me on this number. It's just an example number. So, but Google will, for our website, for example, website, they will know, 15 do the conversion. So this part is the modeling. So Google has tracked the 50 conversions plus will forecast 15 conversions. So in your Google Ads account, you will see 65 reported conversions. So the benefit for you as the advertiser is you will see a more full picture. It will still not be the exact number, right? So the exact number might be 70 or something. But the number is much, much closer to the reality than if you only report the 50. And that's why it's important for Google. You see higher numbers in your Google AdWords account. You know better that the advertising is is working, basically, that the conversions are there, that your money is well spent, and therefore you're more likely to stay doing advertising on Google, and you don't go spend your advertising money on Facebook or something. So that's the main thing, right? That's when we're coming back to the first slide. Google wants to protect the advertising money. So that's an example calculation. Where the data is coming from, also there an example. So Google is on many websites, right? There is so many of millions of websites that are using Google Analytics and Google Ads tracking and all these things. So Google had a lot of time to build models. So just from the big amount, they know basically what the normal user is doing. So they have big models, and these big models will tell them what the normal user is doing. And this model is based, for example, on the device type, the country, browser, the conversion type, day and time, etc. So they know from all these websites, they have some kind of model that's the mix of all these websites, basically. And now they will also do a model on your website because you have accepted users. There might be a user missing here and a user missing there, but you also have accepted users. And from these accepted users, so Google will not see, okay, what's their behavior? What are they doing? How do they react? And Google will compare what's happening on your website with the models, and we'll see, wait a second, it seems like there's something missing, right? There's some users that we don't know, that we don't see, that might be the rejected users. So Google will combine these two, basically the model and the observed data, combine this and report basically the missing pieces to you, right? So you will see your data plus the model data, and as I said, it will not be 100% accurate, but it will be closer to reality than if you only track the accepted users. So then how do we implement this stuff? As I mentioned before, there is hard blocking and soft blocking. Google calls this the basic implementation and the advanced implementation. The basic implementation is this hard blocking. So Google tags in the website will not be fired before consent is given. So that's the, let's say, I would say the normal way, the legally safer way. We block all the Google tags and wait for consent. When consent is given, consent manager activates the Google tags and the Google tags can do their work. Downside is you have less data, you have a lower accuracy in the models. It's basically not so good for Google for conversion modeling and for analytics, etc. It's legally safer, right? Conversion modeling is possible. Behavior modeling is not possible, right? As we talked before, behavior modeling will need the soft blocking. This part is, so the basic implementation is meant for bigger websites and apps that have more than 700 clicks per week. So that's the 700 clicks for the conversion modeling. Or, I mean, that's the Google claim, or that's for websites that want to be legally safe, right? So if you want to be legally safe, hard blocking is usually the way there. The other part is this advanced implementation, how Google calls it. So that's the soft blocking, meaning you have the Google tags on your page, you don't block them, you just tell Google that there is acceptance or rejection. So basically, when it loads, Google will assume rejection as a default state, so to say. Google will not do anything, or will just do this cookieless pings and will not send cookies, etc. And then when the user decided, the consent manager banner will send the update to Google. Google will know, aha, now there's full tracking possible. Let's do this stuff, and yeah, will collect the full data. That advantage here is it gives you more data. It's a higher accuracy for the models. You can do the conversion modeling with a higher accuracy, and you can also do the behavioral modeling for smaller websites, for example. This way is meant for smaller websites and apps. And if you have less than 700 clicks per week in your Google Ads account, then that's the, let's say, the Google preferred way for you to go. As said, legally, there is big question marks of if this is really like legally compliant. As said, Google is not setting cookies, but there's also, depending on how you read the law, enabling Google can already be an issue. So if you want to be safe, we usually recommend the basic implementation. When you want to use it, go into your consent manager account. In the new interface, you click on the CMPs, you choose your CMP. In the menu, you have integrations, and then there's a Google consent where you just enable this thing. That's everything that you need to do in the account. In the old interface, it's in the menu under CMPs, and you edit the CMPs. There's the last box in the page is called Other Settings. You expand the box, and then there's this this checkbox there that you enable. That's all you need to do in order to enable the consent mode. And as we learned before, you need to have Google Analytics or /and the Google Ads vendor in your vendor list, right? So you need to ask your users for consent for these vendors so that we can send the signals. So that's the only things that you need to do in the account. And then depending on how you're using the consent manager codes, right? So we have this automatic blocking code, we have this manual or semi-automatic blocking code, we have codes for GTM, we have codes in apps. Depending on which codes you're using, there is different ways. I would recommend you to check our help section, so help.consentmanager.net, and just search for Google Consent Mode. We have a like a step-by-step guide for all these combinations. So if you're using consent mode and basic implementation plus automatic, or advanced implementation plus automatic, etc. So all these things you will find in our help. And we'll just go through them real quick. So if you use the automatic blocking code and you want to use the basic implementation, there's basically no change. You do the implementation as you always do. You take our code, put it in the page, and put it as the first thing in the page before any Google tags are loading. We will automatically block the Google tags and unblock them as soon as consent is given. Everything is fine. You don't need to do anything else. If you want to do the advanced implementation, same thing. You put the code in a page, our code in a page, but you also need to add this attribute data CMP AB equals 1 to the Google Analytics code or to your Google Ads tracking code. This will basically tell the automatic blocking to not block the Google codes. So if you look at this example here, that's the automatic blocking code here, and then there follows the Google Analytics code, and then you just add this attribute there. Additionally, you can add the Google domains to your exception list so that you really prevent any blocking happening. Usually that shouldn't be necessary. Usually it should be sufficient to just add this attribute. So that's if you use the automatic blocking code. If you use the semi-automatic blocking code or manual blocking code, again, if you want to use the basic implementation, no changes. You just do it as you usually do. You change the Google codes in your page so that they are blocked. We will automatically unblock them. Same behavior as you do with all the other codes. There's no change to the behavior. If you want to use the advanced implementation, you must use this specific code here. There is the code example. You will also find this code example in the help section so that you copy and paste this. Take this code, copy and paste it before the first Google code in your page. So let's say you have Google Tag Manager or the Analytics or Google Ads or something. Before the first Google page, paste this code in there and do not prepare any Google text for blocking. So if you change the Google codes for blocking, so you added these data, CMP, SRC attributes, etc., remove them. Basically, you leave the Google code in the same way as you get them from Google, right? So that would be the change. Basically, revert your blocking if you have blocking already made in a page, if you want to use the advanced implementation. And the third thing, if you go with GTM, basic implementation, again, same as always. You don't do any changes besides what you anyway do. So you take the triggers, you adjust them as we usually do. So there's this CMP consent vendors contains S26. That's the analytics ID, for example. You adjust your triggers in the usual way, and no other specifics needed. If you want to do the advanced implementation, you will need to change the triggers slightly. So there is a different variable that you will use. It's called user choice type. And the condition is a bit different. So the text that you fire, you will use this user choice type and the regex for certain condition. Again, you will find all this data in our help section. And if needed, if you're using other events that fire later, for example, an add to cart or these kind of things that are usually not fired with a page view, you will use trigger groups in most cases and combine these two things. So that's for GTM. If you have it on your website implemented, you can test it. The easiest way to test it is to take a crawler. Just do a manual crawl, send them on your website in the crawler, and if you scroll down in the crawl result, the last box on the page is like a summary thing. There is a line saying Google Consent Mode found or not found, version 1 or version 2, etc. So it gives you some details on consent mode. That's the easiest way. The other thing is you can use your browser console. In Windows browsers, you just press the F12 button. In Mac, I'm not 100% sure, there's also a button in Mac. Then basically the browser opens the console, and you can just insert some text into the console. You write data layer with a bigger L, press enter, and you get the result of what's in the data layer. You should find an entry where it says consent default, and there's the denied status. It's basically, yeah, as it said, the default status is denied for everything. And then once you click on accept in the cookie banner, we will send another line. So this array gets longer and longer. You will find another line that says consent update, and then it should say something like granted for these four consent mode properties. So that's how you can see if it's working. Pretty easy in most cases. Last thing, Google Consent Mode and in-apps. Again, if you have the basic implementation, there's no change. You just use the app or the app implementation as you're used to it. If you want to use the advanced implementation, we recommend to go with the help section, because it's let's say there's a bit more steps than what fits into my presentation here. So for apps, check the help section, help.consentmanager.net, and just search for Google Consent Mode. On the page, there is these 4 or 5 links for all these combinations: consent mode and automatic, consent mode and semi-automatic, consent mode and GTM, consent mode and in-app. There's consent mode for everything. There's also consent mode, so it's already integrated in our SDKs, the latest version. So if you don't have the latest version yet, maybe it's a time to update our SDKs for in-app. It's also for so for iOS and Android. It's also available for Unity. It is not yet available for React Native and Flutter. There is a community plugin from some third party that can be used, but Google doesn't support this yet officially. But as I said, you can use the community plugin if you want to use it in Flutter or in React Native. Yeah, that's the thing on the consent mode implementation. Just looking at the time, we're also good, but have some minutes left. Yeah, thank you for looking at this so far. If you have questions, as said, feel free to put them in the Q&A box here in the Zoom chat. So in the Zoom bar, there is an icon. It says Q&A, or in my case, it says F&A for whatever reason. You just click on it, and then you can put in the questions, and I will just go through them. We already have some. So first questions: how are strings created prior to 6th of March without ACM string be treated? Or should publisher consent? I agree, this might not be clear. Yeah, Simon, I'm not 100% sure about your questions. How are strings prior? I'm not 100% sure what ACM, what you're referring to. Maybe if you can just rephrase your question in the Q&A box, then I can come back to this later. For now, just for the 6th of March or 7th of March deadline, so all the TCF stuff, so all the publisher related, advertising related, so where Google displays ads on your page, that's, as I said, it's not reflected by consent mode. That's all just TCF things. So nothing will change basically on 6th of March for the advertising, for the display ads. What will change is what might change is the tracking and the analytics, so Google Ads or AdWords, and the Google Analytics and Firebase. As I said, Google recommends you to enable consent mode already now, so that they can start their modeling and have more historic data. Okay, next question. Whether the consent mode should be implemented on landing page to which Google ads are directed if they are not indexed. Yeah, so if they're indexed or not doesn't really matter, right? It's not about the crawler, the Google crawler, so the indexing doesn't matter. What's important is, I mean, if you have a Google code on the page or not, that's the important part, right? So you have Google Analytics, or you have the Google Ads tracking on your page. That's when Google Consent Mode is relevant, and it should be on the landing page. It should be on the conversion page. It should be on all the pages in between, so that Google can basically on every page view, Google knows, aha, okay, consent is given. I can now continue tracking the session. If consent mode is not active somewhere in between, then you might lose the session, right? So Google might not be able to connect the click or the landing page with the conversion page, for example. So that's why it's important to enable it for all of your pages. Next question: do you have a link for the community plugin for React Native? Yes, it's called rnfirebase.io, I think, something like this. It's basically, if you search for React Native and Firebase, it's like the first thing that pops up. So it's like a community plugin for React Native that is supposed to support the consent mode already, but is not officially yet supported by Google. Google was also a bit late with the Unity plugin that just came like last week or the week before or something. If or once we have an official plugin from Google, we will definitely integrate it also in our SDKs. But as I said, at the moment, there's nothing official for React Native and Flutter. Next question. Is it possible to activate consent mode for all our publishers at once in the UI, or can we put a request in this for you? Yeah, so if you have, some of our clients are ad networks with some hundreds of websites or 100 or hundreds of CMPs, sure, you can just get in touch with your account manager, or get in touch with me, or get in touch with support, right? So support at consentmanager.net. Just tell them your account ID and what we can do for you. It's super easy for us to just basically go into our database and enable consent mode for all of your CMPs, so that you don't need to click around there 50 times and enable the stuff. In the new interface, by the way, there is also a mass edit setting, so you can use or basically select many CMPs and then change multiple settings at once. I'm just not 100% sure if it also works for the consent mode setting. I'm not sure. It's limited to some settings. But yeah, as I said, just reach out to your account manager. Next question. That's good. We have many questions here today. Do the upcoming changes also apply to other cookies? For example, Facebook, marketing automations apps. Should you focus on Google tracking? So yeah, so the consent mode, I mean, it's a Google thing, right? So it's Google's tool or Google's way to exchange the signals. What we do, or what you can also do, is if you give consent, we will not only send the Google consent mode signals, we will also send signals for all vendors and all purposes that are in your CMP. So you can use the same logic, the same how you use the triggers, etc., or how you set the use the consent mode in GTM, for example. You can use the same way also for others, for other tools. So, for example, the consent mode signals, they're called I don't know, @_storage, for example, for advertising storage. So you can use the same signal in GTM and just reuse it for some other marketing tool. But you can also use, I think our properties are called CMP underscore and then vendor ID. So let's say CMP underscore S123. So you can also use this signal in your GTM in the same way as you would use the consent mode signals. In the past, especially let's say maybe half a year ago or 1 year ago, the consent mode signals in GTM, so the support for these signals wasn't so 100% optimal, especially when it comes to triggers, trigger groups, and how the behavior works if the trigger is a bit later. So usually, if you're using GTM, we recommend using it the way that we describe in our help section, basically by adjusting the trigger to the CMP event and then using the variables that we have there. But basically, the consent mode signals can be used in the same way. But as I said, if you don't do anything extra, it is just a Google signal. Google is the only one that will understand it. Facebook, if you don't do anything with it, Facebook will not understand it again, and Facebook will not try to understand it. As I said, you can use it in GTM to trigger Facebook, but Facebook itself will not, Facebook will just see, I'm triggered or I'm not triggered. Yeah. Okay, next question. Can we host script for semi-automatic blocking in our server-side script we host for our publishers, or must it be hard-coded in the website? No, so the semi-automatic blocking code can be basically anywhere on the page, can be in the page directly, can be on a script, can be in GTM, doesn't matter. Only the automatic blocking code would need to be directly in the page. The semi-automatic blocking code can be anywhere. The recommendation is, put it as early as possible, right? So that it can load as quick as possible, so it can set all the defaults, etc. And depending on what you're using, let's just go back 2 slides here. Depending on what you're using, basic implementation or advanced implementation, if you're using the advanced implementation, you need to have this extra code snippet before the first Google tag in the page. So that's recommended to be in the page. or in a synchronous external script, right? It needs to load. So this piece needs to load before any Google tag if you want to use the advanced implementation. It doesn't 100% hurt if you don't have it in the page. But yeah, Google recommends it. And from a legal side, if you don't have it in there, Google currently assumes granted as a default. So Google will start setting cookies and tracking if they don't have the signal. So it makes sense to put this thing in the website. Otherwise, as I said, if you use the basic implementation, you can use the semi-automatic blocking code wherever you want. Next question. Oh, that was actually the last question. Yeah, so actually, so RN Firebase was right. Thanks for confirming. So rnfirebase.io is the Firebase plugin for React Native. We have some more minutes, so if you want, feel free to put more questions in there in the box. Otherwise, I mean, we also covered a lot. As I said, we will put it on our website, the recording, so that you can watch it later. In general, the recommendation is always go to our help section. There's a lot of information on this. Reach out to support. They're always happy to help, or to your account manager. One more question. What is the difference between basic and advanced implementation? Let's go quickly back to this. Oh, there. Basically, basic implementation, hard blocking, advanced implementation, soft blocking. Hard blocking means, yeah, no Google tags on the page before consent is given. So we only activate Google if consent is given. And the advanced implementation is the soft blocking, where the Google tags are always active, so even before consent is given. And the only difference is that we send them the signals. So basically here you don't block anything. We just tell Google, please don't do something. And then it's about Google to do it, while in the basic implementation, due to the hard blocking, Google can't track unless we enable them, right? Yeah, so that's this topic. Any more questions? I also feel that we covered basically most of it. If you have a Google account manager, I also recommend you reaching out to them. They have really nice PDFs. Usually Google is not so much how should I say, the Google help is usually a bit hard to read, and there's a lot of, let's say, holes in the documentation. But for the consent mode, they really did a good job. So they have like PDFs that I think we have, like, it's called the Google Playbook. There's like, I think 30 pages or something, and it's really good background information. So yeah, Google Account Manager can maybe give you access to these information if you want more. Or as I said, reach out to your consent manager, account manager, or the consent manager help if you or the support team if you want any more information. Okay, since there are no more questions coming in, I think we're good for today. As said, we put the recording on our website. Thank you for your participation, and yeah, good luck with your consent mode implementation. Bye-bye.